When we think about moving through nature or even just walking around our neighborhoods, two words often come up: path and trail. At first glance, they might seem to mean the same thing. Both are walkways, both guide our movement, and both are made for travel. But if we dig a little deeper, we'll find that path and trail have subtle differences in meaning, history, and usage. Understanding those differences doesn't just sharpen our vocabulary. It helps us appreciate the way people interact with land, culture, and language. In today's video, we're going to unpack the nuances between paths and trails, explore where these terms come from, and talk about how each word shapes our perception of the world around us. Let's explore, right here, on History of Simple Things. Let's begin with the word path. The idea of a path goes back thousands of years. At its core, a path is a walkway that's usually well-defined and easier to travel. The word itself comes from Old English path, which meant a track or road. It often implies something human-made or at least well-trodden by people over time. A path is typically clear, direct, and often found in more organized settings. Think of a garden path lined with bricks, a paved path through a city park, or even metaphorical uses like the path to success. Paths are designed, or at least recognized, as routes meant for consistent use, usually by foot, sometimes by bicycle, and in some cases even for small vehicles. They carry with them a sense of intention and order, as though someone planned them out to make movement simple and accessible. On the other hand, the word trail brings a different image to mind. Trails are usually less structured, more natural, and often associated with wilderness or outdoor exploration. The word trail comes from the Old French word trahiller, which means to drag or to follow. That etymology tells us something important. Trails are not always made deliberately. They are often discovered by following something, like the tracks of animals or the footsteps of earlier travelers. When you hear the word trail, you probably think of hiking trails through forests, mountain trails winding up steep slopes, or even animal trails cutting through tall grass. A trail feels adventurous, rugged, and connected to exploration. Unlike paths, trails don't always lead to predictable destinations. They can meander, twist, and sometimes vanish altogether, making them less about efficiency and more about experience. One key difference between paths and trails lies in their surroundings. Paths are commonly found in more controlled, human-centered environments. You'll find them in urban settings, gardens, campuses, and neighborhoods. Trails, however, are more at home in natural environments: national parks, mountains, forests, and deserts. If a path feels like a shortcut to get you somewhere quickly and comfortably, a trail feels like a journey in itself, an invitation to engage with the wilderness. This distinction often affects the way people use the words. Someone going for a short walk in a park is likely to say they're strolling along a path. Someone preparing for a long hike in the mountains will say they're heading out on a trail. Another interesting difference is in the way we use these words metaphorically. In everyday speech, path is frequently used in symbolic or figurative ways. We talk about life paths, career paths, spiritual paths, or even choosing a path at a crossroads in our lives. The word implies guidance, structure, and progress. Trails, by contrast, are less commonly used in that metaphorical sense, but when they are, the connotation is about leaving marks behind, blazing a new trail, or following in someone else's footsteps. To blaze a trail means to do something new and pioneering, something no one has done before. That sense of exploration fits perfectly with the adventurous, less predictable nature of trails in the real world. It's also worth noting that these words can sometimes overlap depending on region or culture. In some English-speaking countries, what one group calls a path, another might call a trail. For example, in the United Kingdom, it's common to hear about public footpaths, which are walking routes across fields, towns, and countryside. In the United States, however, the same kind of walkway might be more often called a trail, especially if it runs through rural or wooded areas. The terminology reflects cultural attitudes toward walking, landscape, and even history. Paths in Europe often reflect centuries of use, connecting villages and landmarks. Trails in America often reflect exploration, expansion, and a connection to untamed wilderness. From a practical standpoint, the way paths and trails are built also differs. Paths are often constructed with materials like gravel, bricks, concrete, or asphalt, making them stable and durable. They're usually intended for a wide range of people, from joggers to families with strollers. Trails, on the other hand, are usually less developed. They might just be dirt tracks worn into the ground by repeated use, or they may be lightly maintained with wooden markers or stones. Trails often embrace natural obstacles rather than remove them, meaning hikers encounter rocks, roots, streams, and steep inclines. This difference reinforces the idea that a path is about convenience and accessibility, while a trail is about challenge and immersion in nature. Language also reflects emotion, and here the two words diverge again. A path often feels calm, steady, and reassuring. It's something you can rely on. A trail, though, feels exciting, adventurous, maybe even a little daunting. The emotional weight of each word colors how we perceive the journey we're taking. If someone tells you they're on a path, you imagine direction and certainty. If they say they're on a trail, you imagine discovery and exploration. These subtle emotional undertones are part of what makes language so fascinating, and why distinguishing between the two words is more meaningful than it might seem at first. So what's the takeaway here? While paths and trails both guide our steps, they're not quite the same. Paths are about order, intention, and accessibility, walkways designed for ease and predictability. Trails are about exploration, adventure, and sometimes uncertainty, routes that invite us into the wild or the unknown. Both words reveal not only how we move through physical spaces, but also how we think about journeys in our lives, whether they're literal or metaphorical. Next time you set out for a walk, take a moment to notice whether you're on a path or a trail. That small distinction might change the way you experience the world under your feet. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.